Could Poland be following in the footsteps of the UK and heading for Polexit, a separation from the European Union? Tens of thousands of Poles have taken part in pro-EU protests after a ruling by the nation's constitutional court inflamed tensions with Brussels. Protesters fear that the court ruling, which found that parts of EU law were incompatible with the Polish constitution, would ultimately force the country to leave the bloc. Former ambassador for the UK to Poland is Charles Crawford and joins me now. Charles, is this surprising to you that Poland's taken to the street in honour of wanting to stay in the bloc? How anti-EU do you think the current ruling party is?
Well, there's different questions there. I think the thing to understand about Poland is its history. And for really a long time, it's been squeezed between Germany and Russia. And so when Poland ended communism, there was a strategic reorientation of Poland towards, practical cooperation with Germany, with Western Europe, rather than looking east. And this is deeply embedded, I think. And so the great mass of Poles would not vote for Polexit, that's for sure. The question is rather, what is the extent of EU power in Poland? Are there any limits to that, and who decides? And that's really what this is about.
Poland has been at odds with the powers that be in Brussels for quite a long time now. They don't seem to be doing a lot of things right, according to, the Commission at the moment. Do you think that's a relationship that can be rebuilt, or does one side have to give? The EU seems intent on deeper integration and empire building. Poland, perhaps, is a country that benefits, certainly, from membership to the EU, but still has quite a conservative streak running down its heart.
Well, sure. I think it's so complicated, all this. I always like to say, it's like Shrek, ogres have lairs and these issues have lairs. So if you look at this issue, there's the lair of Polish politics, there's the lair of Brussels politics, there's the lair of Brussels institutions fighting with each other over which is dominant. There's the lair of money, which you mentioned. There's the lair of sovereignty, which is very sensitive, and maybe underneath all these are issues of just pride, really, and national identity, which are very, very, sensitive for obvious reasons. So I think when you say, is the EU, so to speak, in some way against Poland or having a clash with Poland, Poland is part of the EU. Poland isn't having a clash with itself, particularly. It's really an institutional battle going on in Brussels over, and with Warsaw and with other member states, of course, don't forget that, of the limit of EU powers. What we've seen really over 50, 60 years is the power of EU institutions really growing, and member states have given Brussels those powers. And the question is, what are the limits of those powers? And what happens if a ruling of some sort in Brussels comes up against a national constitutional right as you see it? And that's an interesting question, and it's not a silly question. And I think I can understand why the Commission would want to take a strong stand against Poland, because that's the Commission's job. But I can also imagine there are quite a few member states watching this quite carefully just to see how far the Commission is prepared to go, because they wouldn't like the Commission to go too far.
It's interesting you say that, because it seems to me Brexit has precipitating and almost mounting disquiet across the continent on the sort of perceived stretch of sovereignty. You've got Michel Barnier, of all people in France, talking about opting out of aspects of the ECJ. Poland's issues have often been tied to their sort of relative social conservatism compared to some of the social advancements that the European Union would like to see its member states have. But do you think that, for instance, something like the European Recovery Fund, which we're going to hear a lot more about over the coming year, where essentially you've got these sort of conditional bailouts where everyone's paid into the pot in the centre and then countries will be helped to pay off pandemic debt, but with all sorts of stipulations, do you think that's going to cause bad blood between Poland and Brussels?
I think the thing to understand is that the EU there's always bad blood all the time. And the point about any EU compromise is not that everyone is equally more or less happy. It's that everyone is more or less equally unhappy. That's the nature of how it works. Now, one of the things that Brussels, for this purpose, if you like, the Commission and perhaps the court as well, would like to do would be to say, OK, Poland, if you want to have all these independent sort of positions, which we think go against the European position you've agreed to, then we may have to take away your money. And that then takes you into a complete sort of dense what's the word, network of rabbit holes about the legal rights to who can block this and who can allow that, and under what treaty clause is this allowed and that allowed, and all these things drag on, in principle, indefinitely. Having said that, I think the tone of this is a bit different, because I think the sort of immediate sense of, if you like, defiance or challenge to Brussels coming from Warsaw is quite clear. And I think I can understand why Brussels would want to take a stand against that. But does that mean that in 18 months' time there won't be a messy compromise? No, there could be a messy compromise for sure, because the EU is about messy compromises.
And whereabouts do you think we are in terms of the Polish population and their relationship with the EU? Do you think, by and large, that society is fairly comfortable with being a member state, or is it beginning to fracture down the middle?
No, I think it's pretty comfortable. I mean, I don't think anyone watching this should think that the Polexit is something a bit like Brexit trundling down the line. It just isn't like that at all. You've got to remember that Poland joining the Western European family for Poland, which was abolished for over 100 years, is an existential achievement. Poland has gone from being a fairly poor communist country to the 20th biggest economy in the world. This is an astonishing sort of practical achievement which the Poles have managed over the last 30 or so years, and this means that the dynamic in Poland is completely different, and Poland benefits hugely from EU funds. Now, that's not to say they couldn't manage without some of those funds, but they do. They're the biggest probably beneficiary of EU funds, for the structural funds and so on, for building roads. You go to Poland, you can see these roads. The place is being changed. I was there the other week. The change is dramatic. So people associate this with being part of the Western family, and they're right to do so. And so anything which looks like it would seriously put at risk that, I think, would be pretty unpopular. And I think the ruling party doesn't want to do that. But the ruling party is also quite good at sort of putting a stick into a problem and making a loud noise from it to see what happens. And that, I think, is where we are at the moment.